Hey everyone, just letting you know the 6th chapter of my webcomic Nocturnal is out now. This feels kind of odd. In a way, it's a video I never really pictured myself making, because it felt like Vinland Saga was almost this, eternal thing. And yes, it was always releasing, it was always inching closer to that inevitable ending. But now that it's actually here, I don't really know how I'm gonna process this. Because Vinland Saga means a lot to me, and it's a series I've been with for a very long time. Far more than most English readers. I've been reading Vinland Saga for 10 years. And we have had quite a journey. Those first few years were a bit harrowing, because at the time, while so many of us manga collectors loved Vinland Saga, it just wasn't that popular. So every time they would release a new book in English, we were worried that it would be the last, that it would get discontinued. But thankfully, and after a very long time, the series ended up getting a really great anime adaptation, which really boosted its popularity. From there, the English release would only get more care, and of course we also got a fantastic second season. And now in 2025, 20 years after Makoto Yukimura first started Vinland Saga, the story of Thorfinn has come to an end, and I'm here to talk to you about it. I try my best to keep my reviews as spoiler-free as possible, but it's very hard to talk about Vinland Saga without mentioning its overarching themes, the journey of our main character, and the general idea of what each story arc is about. I won't be going into specifics about big events and the fates of certain characters, but just be warned if you want to go into this series completely blind, which is something I do recommend if you haven't. I think if you've seen at least the first 2 seasons of the anime, though, you're pretty good. For those unaware, Vinland Saga is the story of a young boy named Thorfinn growing up in Iceland 1,000 years ago. Thorfinn was born into a peaceful village, but when war comes knocking, things get a bit messy, and Thorfinn watches as his father, Thors, a famed warrior of the Jomsvikings, gets assassinated by the pirate Viking Askeladd right in front of his eyes. Unable to let this go, Thorfinn swears vengeance, and despite still being a small child, vows to kill Askeladd for revenge. So he tags along with Askeladd's crew. They don't see him as a threat. He grows up, becomes a skilled warrior, and his entire life has now become about trying to grow strong enough to kill Askeladd. It is all he knows. But the world won't wait for him. There's a lot going on. Askeladd and his band are busy people. It's a very tumultuous time in Europe. I mean, throughout history, when wasn't it? There are warring factions, kings and princes, political maneuvering. Thorfinn finds himself caught up in all of it, but he doesn't really care, because he still only has one goal. But you see, Vinland Saga is not really about any of this. To understand what it's about, we have to go back to the beginning, where we meet Thors. When Thors buys the freedom of a dying slave, just so he can die in peace. When he throws his sword away, sacrificing himself to save his family and friends from the pirates. Thors was a true warrior, and no one understands it. None of Thors' old companions understand why he gave up a life of battle to settle down in a peaceful village. Thorfinn does not understand why his father didn't fight back. But when Thorfinn's life as a warrior is abruptly cut short, after he experiences over a decade of brutal violence and hardship, is when he truly, finally starts to understand his father, and makes a vow to live like he did, as a pacifist. But he understands that war-torn Europe is not the place for this. If war can even reach his quiet village in Iceland, where the heck can he go? He remembers the stories that the legendary explorer Leif Erikson used to tell him as a child, a land Erikson once discovered far to the west. It's not on any maps, and there are a few alive who have seen it, but this fertile, peaceful land is known as Vinland. And that's the ticket, baby. That's the land of peace Thorfinn's dreaming about. And once he comes to this epiphany is when you truly understand what all of this build-up has been for. Makoto Yukimura's grand ultimate thesis about pacifism, told through a historical lens. And as the series continues, we see how the points for and against pacifism are weaved throughout the story. Because Thorfinn obviously can't do this work alone, but almost no one understands him entirely. especially. This is a culture that idolizes war. To throw it all away to live in a peaceful world seems cowardly to so many people. There are also others who sympathize with him, but understand that violence is a necessity in this brutal world. It challenges Thorfinn. It oftentimes almost breaks Thorfinn, but his resilience is what keeps the dream of Vinland alive. Now, if you know anything about world history, you may know where this series is going, and yeah, it does go there. This series has a very predictably bittersweet ending, but it also ends on a very hopeful note, showing that while we live in a horrible world and horrible things are oftentimes inevitable, there will always be people like Thorfinn looking for their Vinland. There will be challenges along the way, but these are people who will never give up fighting for what's right, no matter the sacrifice. Something that, of course, history often proves true. Now, I know that all kind of made it seem like Vinland Saga is like a textbook or something. No, it is still a very fun and entertaining action-packed manga, and that's why I love it so much. Even though it has all these very serious, profound themes, we still have giant muscle men uppercutting horses. Let's go! We have giant muscle men wrestling with bears. Let's go! Giant muscle men fighting whatever this thing is. It's the same giant muscle men each time. It's Thorkel. He's goated. Yes, for all of the greater meanings, the moment-to-moment stuff in Vinland Saga is absolutely excellent. The attention to detail for this setting is incredible. This man has done so much research to make everything as accurate as possible, and it really pays off, giving us a very authentic-feeling story. While the action is oftentimes a backdrop for the series delivering its messages, I mean, it's still incredibly thrilling and exciting. Yukimura really knows how to crank up the intensity. We get really sharp dialogue. He also knows when to cut back a little and let things get a bit more lighthearted. You know, the old Berserk policy, we don't want to be, down in the dumps the whole time. And he's just so good at making everything feel engaging. There are infamously long stretches where there's not much action happening, where we're just hanging out with our characters on a farm as they plant wheat. They love their wheat. They plant a ton of wheat in this series. And it's like the most engaging thing you'll ever read. It's like magic. And the part of what makes the series so engaging, of course, are its amazing characters. I don't really have to say any more about Thorfinn. I mean, I really think he's one of the best main characters of all time. His journey is absolutely incredible. But this cast is full of fantastic, memorable characters. Some of them are more one-dimensional, but often to serve a thematic purpose. There's actually a lot of parallel characters in this series, because as it spans so many years and so many locations, oftentimes, like, different story arcs will have a completely different cast. But we see how there are always people like Thorkel, always people like Prince Canute. These are people Thorfinn understands he will always have to deal with, and no matter how long it takes, no matter what Thorfinn has to do, he's always trying to get through to him. But we also have incredibly fleshed out characters like Askeladd the Viking. As much as I love Thorfinn, he is probably my favorite character in the series. He's a bad guy, he's done some terrible things, but he's so clever, and just the way he goes about scheming, it's so, oh, he's so good. What all-time banger character. One of Thorfinn's main companions throughout the series, Einar, also has a very fantastic character arc. Thorfinn kind of sees himself in Einar, almost like what if his life had gone differently, and he really tries his best to keep Einar away from the horrors of his past. We also have characters like Hild, who are on very similar paths to Thorfinn and bring up some really heavy moral dilemmas throughout the series. But over time, we start to see how these people can be changed as well. If you couldn't tell by now, I love this series, obviously. But nothing's truly perfect. There were a few minor nitpicks I had with it that I want to bring up, because some of them are a little goofy. For one, while this series does have comic relief sprinkled throughout, I think there are a few moments where there's a tendency for the comedy to sort of overshadow what's going on, to the point where some characters are just straight up comic relief characters, and I don't think that the stuff with them always hits as hard as it probably should have. I'm talking Bug Eyes, I'm talking Siggy. I love Siggy, by the way, I think his arc is fantastic, but most of it is spent with him just bumbling around being like, my wife, my wife. Some of the comic relief in here is great and really funny. I think anytime Thorkel is on screen, it's just, peak goated fiction. But I do think it goes a bit too overboard sometimes. Another thing the series, sometimes decides to do, not very often, but is introduced like some very light supernatural elements. In a way, I like this because it kind of plays into the more legend mythology side of this, era of history. But I also think it's a little on the nose when you take a puff of the vape and it shows you like footage of World War II. that whole sequence was nuts. And then there's stuff like Ymir. I honestly, Ymir is probably like the funniest moment in the series for me, but I don't really get it. What is this guy? Bro is just like, Ymir, come forth! And then this like giant, like monster man shows up, exchanges a few blows, and then we never see him again, and he's never explained? What the hell was going on with Ymir? This is like the most baffling thing in the whole series. I don't understand it. I love it, but at the same time, I'm just like, what do I even make of this? The last thing I'll say is that this series does take place, obviously, over a very long period of time. There's a lot of traveling, and, traveling back then took forever. So there are a lot of time jumps, and there's one in particular that feels a bit weird, and there is actually a reason for it. You see, while the series has like its 4 major arcs, there was actually meant to be another one in the middle there somewhere. One that the series actually was building up, and Yukimura intended to write it, but what happened was, of course, COVID ruined goddamn everything. Yukimura intended to travel to this new location to do research so he could write this story arc, but because of COVID, he couldn't do that and decided to just skip it entirely. Now that the series is all over and I see the bigger picture, I'm fine with that. Like, at the time people were disappointed, I don't think it was really necessary anymore. But it does seem like there were character moments Yukimura intended for this arc that, of course, he couldn't put there anymore, so he saved them for after the time skip. And because of that, it feels like in this moment, like the characters were kind of stagnant and not much was actually going on with them, despite so much time apparently passing. It just didn't really feel like it. The moments I'm talking about did still hit incredibly well, but that was just a minor thing that took me out of it a bit. But overall, yeah, this is still one of the best manga I've ever read. And because it's a manga, let's briefly talk about the artwork, cause holy moly, is good. And it's interesting looking at the series over the course of its 20 years in serialization, because the art actually went through quite a few iterations. When the series first began, it was actually a weekly serialization, and the artwork was amazing for weekly, but it of course didn't give him all that much time to draw it. But early on, the series shifts to a monthly serialization, and that's when we see a massive improvement in the artwork, and it becomes absolutely breathtaking. And this amazing artwork is consistent throughout the rest of the series. The extra time he got just really made him help flesh out the way this world looks. It's so gritty and brutal and as historically accurate as it could possibly be. But then, like the final quarter of the series, we actually see another shift where he went from hand-drawn to digital art. And largely his art style still remains intact. There's just one nitpick here. There are moments, mostly in action scenes in this section, where it's very clear that digital effects are being used, stuff like blur. And I never really enjoyed those. It kind of took me out of it a bit and like the gritty art style of the series. There's a place for that stuff in manga for sure, not against it at all, but it was just a small inconsistency I had. Overall, I mean, I'm incredibly happy with how this series turned out now that it's all over. I think it's not only an amazing, fun action-adventure story, but as a piece of thematic storytelling, it is just so insightful, so moving. I've read over 100 manga. This is still easily like top 5 I've ever read. And if I haven't convinced you yet, if you still haven't checked it out, my god, get the hell on it. All but one volume has been released in English. That last one should come out next year. I'm really hoping the anime continues, because that's how a lot of people have been experiencing this amazing story. But yeah, man, I'm just thrilled to be here, thrilled to have experienced it. Check out Yukimura's previous series, Planet Test. That is also amazing, and I cannot wait to see what he does next. I can only imagine. God damn. Maybe he could finally take that trip he was planning on doing during COVID and make a story set in that place. That'd be funny. Also, Vinland Saga 2. I'd be here for it. Why the hell not? Thank you all for watching. Leave your thoughts on anything Vinland Saga in the comments down below, and I will see you soon for a new video.